He spent his life fixing what others threw away, hands stained with oil, dignity tested every day. One careless moment, one cruel challenge, and a man who had already endured a lifetime of quiet humiliation was pushed into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. The laughter came easily. The respect did not. What no one saw was the pressure building behind his silence, or the truth hidden beneath the grease and grit. This was never just about an engine. It was about power, prejudice, and a line that should never have been crossed. And when that line was crossed, everything changed. Could one underestimated man force the world to confront its own bias? It was another busy morning at the small auto shop where Marcus had spent years mastering every engine and transmission. Known for his steady hands and quiet confidence, he took pride in leaving every vehicle better than he found it. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and he liked it that way. Outside the shop, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, indifferent to who walked its streets. Yet on this day, the ordinary would collide with something extraordinary. A luxury car rolled up, a woman stepped out, and a glance exchanged between them hinted at a test Marcus hadn't asked for, and a challenge no one should have dared to give. The stage was set, and Marcus didn't yet realize how high the stakes would become. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, finishing the last touches on an engine that had given the shop's usual staff more trouble than expected. The luxury car outside gleamed in the harsh sunlight, its polished surface a stark contrast to the grime under his nails. The woman who stepped out wasn't just a customer. She carried an air of authority, her expensive heels clicking like a countdown to something Marcus couldn't yet name. She circled the car, eyes scanning, lips curled in amusement as she stopped by the hood. "Think you can fix this?" she asked, her voice dripping with casual mockery. Marcus nodded politely, his fingers itching to get started. But then came the words he would never forget. "Fix this engine and maybe I'll consider something else. Marry me if you get it right." The statement hung in the air, sharp and impossible, a challenge soaked in power and prejudice. Marcus froze for a heartbeat, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Around the shop, workers glanced up, eyebrows raised, tension thickening like smoke. The joke, if it was one, wasn't funny. It wasn't just the audacity of it. It was the assumption that he could be belittled, that his skills, his dignity, could be toyed with in such a public, humiliating way. The laughter from her companion, another suited figure leaning against the car, echoed like a countdown. Every wrench Marcus picked up felt heavier than usual. Hands that had fixed engines flawlessly before now trembled, not from fear of the work, but from the weight of being judged unfairly, of having his very humanity questioned. Each turn of the bolt became a silent protest. He would not falter, he would not submit to ridicule. Yet with every passing second, the room seemed smaller, the air thicker, the stakes higher. Time slowed, measured in the tick of the shop clock and the hiss of a compressed air gun. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, steady but loud in his ears. The woman leaned closer, peering over his shoulder, smirking as if betting against him. "Are you sure you can handle this?" she taunted. The words weren't just a question. They were a gauntlet thrown at his feet, an invisible barrier that he had to break through. As Marcus wiped sweat from his brow, a sense of quiet determination grew. He remembered every insult, every glance that had ever made him feel smaller than he was, and funneled it into precision, focus, and skill. The engine roared under his touch, alive in a way that reflected his resolve. And just when it seemed he might actually succeed, a sudden twist threatened to undo everything. A part malfunctioned, sparks flew, and the room held its breath. Would Marcus finish this task, or would the humiliation finally crush him? Marcus's hands moved with precise, practiced motions, yet the pressure was unbearable. Every turn of the wrench carried more than just mechanical weight. It carried the judgment of a room that assumed he could fail, the mockery of a woman who wielded privilege like a weapon. Sweat dripped from his forehead, stinging his eyes as if the air itself conspired to make him falter. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life, a perfect hum beneath his fingers, but the moment wasn't over. The woman's laughter cut through the shop, sharp and incredulous. "Is that it? You actually did it?" Her voice was disbelief twisted with superiority, as if she couldn't fathom that he had succeeded on his own terms. Around the shop, workers watched in silent awe, some daring to hope, others barely able to breathe. Then came the final test. She leaned closer, eyes narrowed, as if trying to find a flaw he hadn't yet revealed. Every muscle in Marcus's body tightened. The room seemed to shrink, the sound of the engine now deafening, echoing the tension that had built for hours. He could feel the weight of every stereotype, every assumption, every whispered doubt pressed down on him. One wrong move, one misstep, and the humiliation would be absolute. And yet, in that moment, something shifted. Marcus didn't just tighten a bolt, he stood taller. He didn't just finish a job, he reclaimed his dignity. The room seemed to still around him, the noise fading as his focus became a force unto itself. And then, with a quiet authority that cut sharper than any words, he straightened, met her gaze, and left the final verdict unspoken, her smirk faltering, replaced by the first trace of something like recognition. It was the engine that ran flawlessly, yes, but it was more than that. It was a statement, a silent but. Marcus stepped back from the engine, hands still trembling from hours of pressure, sweat, and silent confrontation. The room had shifted. What had begun as mockery and challenge now hung in the air as recognition, quiet and undeniable. He had proved more than skill. He had proven dignity, perseverance, and the courage to stand tall in the face of prejudice. For a moment, the laughter died, replaced by a heavy silence that spoke louder than words ever could. As he walked out of the shop, the sun hitting his face felt different, sharper, as if the world itself had acknowledged the quiet reckoning that had just occurred. Yet Marcus knew this wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reflection of a deeper reality, a society that still measures people by skin, status, or stereotype, rather than character or capability. For every person who had doubted him, there were countless others facing similar tests, often with no outcome as just or visible. He didn't need applause, validation, or recognition. What mattered was that he had confronted injustice head-on and refused to be diminished by it. And in that refusal, he left a message that could not be ignored. Talent, integrity, and humanity transcend the narrow confines of prejudice. This story is not just Marcus's. It is a reminder of how easy it is to belittle, underestimate, or dismiss someone because of who they are, and how extraordinary courage can force the world to reckon with its biases. The question remains, how often do we see these moments? And do we have the courage to stand with those being judged unfairly? Because until the world listens, until every overlooked skill and every silenced voice is recognized, the struggle continues. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of quiet defiance to remind everyone watching that injustice can be confronted, and dignity can always prevail.